They called her unworthy of the throne, until the Alpha King chose her over every noble Luna. Mira Calloway had exactly 3 things that belonged to her. A wool coat with one missing button, a copy of Pack Territorial Law she had read so many times the spine had given up, and the habit of standing at the edge of rooms where she did not belong, watching, saying nothing, waiting for it to be over. Tonight, she was doing all 3. The Ashwood Grand Hall smelled like candle wax and old money. Chandeliers hung above the crowd like small captured suns, throwing amber light across silk dresses and polished shoes, and the careful, practiced smiles of women who had been preparing for this night since they were old enough to understand what it meant. Noble daughters, Omega Prime bloodlines, families whose crests were embroidered on their collars in silver thread. Mira's collar was plain. She stood where the line ended, in the gap between the last seated guest and the wall, because no one had saved her a chair, and she had stopped being surprised by that 3 years ago. Around her, the hall buzzed with the particular energy of people performing confidence for an audience of each other. She adjusted her coat, felt the place where the button was missing, looked straight ahead. The selection ceremony had been law for 200 years. Every unmated woman of age within the pack was required to attend. Required. That word did a lot of work. It meant Mira stood in this hall tonight, not because anyone wanted her here, not because she had a chance at anything, but because the law said she must, and the law did not care about feelings. She was fine with that. She understood laws. They were consistent. People were not. Cassandra Callen stood near the front, and she was everything the evening required. Tall, graceful, a bloodline that read like a history book of important names. She had been raised for rooms like this one, the way certain plants are raised for certain climates. The conditions were built around her growth. She caught Mira's eye across the hall once, and her expression said nothing specific. It didn't need to. The look itself was enough. The small, practiced recognition of something that does not register as a threat. Mira looked away first. Not because she was ashamed, because she was tired, and tired is a different thing. Then the doors opened. Not the side doors. The main doors, both of them at once. And the room changed. It was not loud. That was the thing no one told you about genuine power. It did not announce itself with noise. The conversations didn't stop all at once. They simply lost energy, like fires running out of wood, one by one, until the hall was quiet, without anyone deciding to make it quiet. Alpha King Darian Voss walked in like a man who had somewhere else to be, and had agreed to stop here briefly, out of obligation. He was tall, dark-haired. His face held the particular stillness of someone who had long ago stopped performing emotions for rooms that hadn't earned them. He wore no decorative crest, no ceremonial chain, none of the accessories the court expected at events like this. Just dark clothing, well-fitted, a king dressed like a man who didn't need the costume to convince you. He moved through the hall the way surveyors move through land, taking measure, committing nothing. Mira watched him from her place at the edge. She noted the way he looked at the assembled noble daughters. Not cold, not cruel, but with the expression of someone reviewing a list of facts that don't yet add up to an answer. She noted the way the room tilted toward him, the way bodies angled in his direction without their owners quite deciding to do it. She noted when he stopped. He was 20 feet from the front, from Cassandra Callen, who was already arranging her smile into its most compelling shape, from Isolde Hawthorne Reed, whose Omega Prime lineage was the kind that got written about in genealogy documents. From every woman in this hall who had arrived tonight with a reasonable expectation of being seen. He stopped 3 steps before he reached any of them. He stopped at the gap, at the wall, at Mira. The silence that followed was not the silence of ceremony. It was the silence of a room that had just witnessed something it did not have a category for. Cassandra Callen's practiced smile stayed on her face, but stopped reaching her eyes. Isolde Hawthorne Reed went very still. The noble mothers in the gallery above shifted in their seats. Darian Voss looked at Mira Calloway, the way you look at something you have been searching for without knowing you were searching. He said her name. She had no idea how he knew it. The week that followed was organized cruelty made elegant by old habits and older money. Mira's room was in the secondary wing, facing north, catching no sun. Her meals arrived after everyone else's and were lukewarm at best. Her name was mispronounced by women who pronounced every other name in the hall correctly. Small things. Individually, each one meant nothing. Together, they built a very clear sentence. You do not belong here. We will remind you until you agree. She had expected this. Growing up on the edge of things prepares you for edges. What she had not expected was Darian. He did not behave the way powerful men behaved when they had done something the court found inconvenient. He did not behave the way powerful men behaved. He did not behave the way powerful men behaved. He did not behave the way powerful men behaved. He did not behave the way powerful men behaved. For an audience. He simply continued to exist in her direction, which, given who he was, turned out to be enough. He found her in the archive library at 11 at night, because he had looked in every room she was supposed to be in, and she was not there. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor between two shelves, a lamp pulled close, a very old document about water rights spread across her lap, her handwriting in the margins. She looked up. She did not scramble to her feet. He sat down across from her on the floor like this was a normal thing to do, which, for him apparently, it was. They moved the mealtimes on you, he said. Yes. I know. She looked at him steadily. Why are you here? Not unkindly. Genuinely. She was not a woman who asked questions she didn't want answered. He opened his mouth. He had a prepared answer for almost every situation. He had been building a library of prepared answers since he was 19 years old, and inherited a kingdom before he was ready, and learned quickly that uncertainty was a luxury he could not afford in public. He did not have a prepared answer for this. I'm not certain, he said, which was the most honest thing he had said to anyone in a long time. She considered this. Then she turned back to her document, which he understood was not dismissal. It was acceptance, a kind of wordless okay. You can stay, but I'm going to keep working. He stayed. He read over her shoulder. He asked one question about the water rights case, a sharp and specific question, and she answered it without looking up. They sat in the library until nearly 1 in the morning. When she finally closed the document and began organizing her notes, he said, "What made you interested in territorial law?" She was quiet for a moment, then, "It doesn't change based on who's looking at it." He thought about that for a long time after he left. What grew between them did not grow quickly, and it did not grow quietly, and it was not the kind of story anyone in the court knew how to tell. He brought her into council meetings, not to observe, to participate. The first time, the senior advisors arranged their faces into polite expressions that meant the opposite of polite. The second time, she spoke. She addressed the Eastern Territory dispute, which had been deadlocked for 6 years, and laid out the water rights argument with the precision of someone who had read every related document and cross-referenced every precedent. The room was quiet in the way rooms get quiet when someone has said something so correct that disagreement would be embarrassing. The dispute was resolved in 11 days. After that, the advisors stopped arranging their faces. Darian did not tell her he was impressed. He showed it by asking harder questions, by bringing her harder problems, by creating the conditions in which she could demonstrate what she already was, rather than asking her to become something new. She understood this about him slowly, the way you understand a language you did not know you were already learning. The court escalated, as courts do when their expectations are not met. A formal petition arrived challenging Mira's lineage eligibility for the selection. The language was careful and legal, and full of concerns about the integrity of a process that had served the pack for 200 years. It was signed by 3 noble houses, including the Hawthorne Reeds. A housemaid told Mira about it with barely contained excitement. Mira went to the archive library. She was there when Darian found her, 3 hours later. She had 6 documents open around her, cross-referenced and marked, her handwriting connecting sections in a web that would have taken most people a week to assemble. He looked at the documents. He looked at her. Something in his expression moved. "They're going to challenge the selection," she said. "Yes. Do you have a response?" "Several." A pause. "Do you?" She slid her notes across the floor toward him. The argument was technical and precise. The legislative session that had written the selection eligibility clauses had also written the water rights law. The same drafters. The same language. The definition of eligible candidate in the original text was broad enough, under proper reading, to exclude no one the law had not explicitly named. The petition was built on a century of tradition and assumption, not on the actual text. Tradition and assumption, her note said at the bottom, are not law. Darian read to the end. He read it again. When he looked up, she was watching him with that steady expression she wore, not waiting for approval, just watching. "This is correct," he said. "I know." And for the first time since she had been standing at the edge of this hall, Mira Calloway let herself feel the warmth of being known. The grand chamber held the whole pack. Every rank, every family, every name that meant something in Ashwood, and several that didn't, but attended anyway, because these events were how you demonstrated that you existed. Mira stood at the front for the first time in her life. Cassandra Callen's expression did something complicated and then resolved into blankness, which was its own kind of message. Isolde Hawthorne Reed's mother, in the elevated gallery, gripped the railing. The three noble alphas who had sent private correspondence to Darian about the clouding of his judgment sat very still. Darian Voss stood before his court and did not perform. He talked about the Eastern Territory dispute. He named the resolution date. He named the argument that resolved it, and whose reasoning it was built on. He talked about what a Luna's role had always been in the original law, not symbolic, not decorative, and how 2 centuries of tradition had slowly built a different definition over the top of the real one, the way moss grows over a sign until you can't read the sign anymore. He said that he had found someone who could read the sign. He did not say she was beautiful. He did not speak of fate or bond, or the dramatic language the court expected at selection announcements. He spoke about water rights and legal precedent, and the Eastern families who had clean water contracts for the first time in 6 years. He spoke about what it means to govern. The chamber was silent in the way of recalibration, of people being handed a different ruler and realizing, slowly, that their old measurements were not wrong, only insufficient. Mira stood through all of it without moving. Her chin was at the angle she held it when she was working very hard not to show what she felt. The coat was the same wool coat. The missing button was still missing. Inside her chest, something that had been closed for a very long time, sealed against drafts, sealed against hoping for things that announced themselves as impossible, opened. Just a crack, just enough. She kept the name Calloway, both names, hyphenated. She said this once, simply, in the meeting where these details were arranged, and Darian said obviously and moved to the next item, and she had to look at the table for a moment, because obviously did more for her than any speech. Cassandra Callen married a border alpha the following spring. She seemed, at the wedding, genuinely relaxed in a way she had not been during the selection, and Mira thought perhaps some people bloom best when released from the expectations built around them. The Isolde Hawthorne Reed turned her considerable focus toward pack law reform. She was good at it, genuinely, rigorously good, and Mira sent her a note 6 months after the selection saying so. Isolde sent one back. They were not friends, exactly. They were something the court didn't have a word for, 2 capable women who had stopped competing for something and discovered they had always been working on the same things. The archive library acquired a second lamp. This happened without announcement. Mira arrived one evening to find it there, angled precisely where she would have put it herself. She said nothing about it. Darian said nothing about it. Some things do not need to be explained. The Eastern Territory families got clean water contracts reviewed and extended. The petition against Mira's eligibility was formally dismissed on procedural grounds, which meant the court had to acknowledge, in writing, in the official record, that the challenge had no legal basis. This document existed now. It would exist for 200 more years. She thought about that sometimes. Her name, in the record, not in the genealogy books, not in the bloodline documents, not among the crests embroidered on collars. In the law. On a night in early winter, Mira sat in the archive library with a new document and the comfortable silence she had learned to trust, and Darian came in without knocking because by now he did not need to, and sat across from her on the floor because that was how they had always done it, and read over her shoulder, and asked one sharp question, and she answered without looking up. Outside, the hall continued to perform itself. Names were introduced. Crests were displayed. The court moved in its current, as it always had and likely always would. Inside the library, 2 people worked. The lamp was warm. The document was interesting. The world, for the moment, was exactly the size it needed to be.